I've opened a session called Exploring the Structure Interface. If you want to build this yourself, create a stereo instrument track, and then on the first insert, go in and multi-channel plug-in, instrument, structure free, and you should get this page. Structure free ships with ProTools 12, and it's a watered down version of the structure plugin, so you can see if you like it and want to invest in the real thing. So if you're not familiar with sampling, what we're doing is bringing a sound or a series of sounds to the keyboard so we can play them like a musical instrument. We can do this with a piano or drum sounds, dogs barking, light bulbs exploding, human voices, room tone, whatever we can record. And triggering a sound from the keyboard has advantages over dragging and dropping it into the timeline. Structure is how we assign sounds to the keys of our keyboard. So let's see how these patches are put together. Structure opens with a sine wave that's across the keyboard. So if I hit an A above middle C, I get 440. If you want to change the pitch of the sound that you're triggering, you can change it in octaves or semitones. So let's go down a semitone. I'll hit that same key, and I'm triggering a different pitch now. Let's go back to 440. You can fine tune that as well. Pitch bend is the wheel on the far left side of a MIDI keyboard. Let's change this to 24 on both sides. So that's 2 full octaves on the pitch bend. So here's middle C. Sorry, that's a little piercing in the ear probably. But I have kind of an instant theremin now using my pitch wheel. So in the key range, you can set the effective triggering area on the low side and on the high side. So maybe you only want this sine wave to be on one note or one octave or a couple of octaves or way down here but not up there. So set the low end, set the high end, and then it only appears where you patch it. Here are the reference numbers down here. If you're not familiar with a MIDI keyboard, this is C3, that's commonly middle C. There's the octave below that, the octave below that, and the octave below that. Now in this case, the sound is patched across the entire keyboard. Let's look at a different patch. We have been looking all along up here for patches, and that's where they're stored. And then we have the alternate view of looking at them in the kind of library system. Here, there's nothing. The patches are all stored over here under the word patch. There's the structure-free library that ships with structure-free. We'll take a look at the quick start, and let's look at a guitar. It would be really hard to have one sample of a guitar patched across the entire keyboard like the sine wave was. So I think here we have probably 15 or 20 different samples that are going to trigger to give us an authentic replication of a guitar. And of course we get the nice finger squeak in there. Now all of a sudden we had some parameters that we didn't have for the sine wave. So more fret noise, a little bit of chorus, add some reverb. So these are things that you would sometimes do up in the sends, but here you can build it right into the patch. So you're not having to add it every single time. If you store this, and we know we can do that up in the preset menu, save settings as. If you store this patch, once you've made it with your custom settings down here, then these will be recalled every time you bring it up, and you won't have to add reverb here and here and here like we sometimes do. So here again, we have patches that are strung together, probably with several notes assigned to each different sample. In the case of drums, now we have, there's a kick, there's a snare, a half-hearted snare. Let me trigger these with the keyboard rather than clicking on them with the mouse. So here, you can see which keys I'm triggering down here. I'm in the C1 area down in here. So here, we don't want the kick drum to be strung across a bunch of notes. We really only want one note assigned to each pitch. And that's typically how a drum patch is laid out in a sampler. Well, those are the most common uses of a sampler in a musical context, but we can also use a sampler in a post-production context. Let's say you're doing post-production on a TV show, and you use a lot of the same sounds every week because the lead character has an office and a home and a car, and those sounds don't change from week to week. So you could set up the phone on one key, let's say that one, and the door slam on another key, let's say that one, and the car starting on another, and the whole keyboard would be the sounds that you use each week for that show. And you could fly them in at the right spot in the movie faster than you could by dragging and dropping from the audio bin. And remember, this is MIDI, so if you miss by a frame or two, it's easy to edit the MIDI and have it occur exactly where you want it. So that's a look at structure free, and in the next movie, we'll look a little deeper.